Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the AI Innovation Space podcast. I'm super excited to introduce my guest here today. His name is Jonathan Reichental, and I have my co-host here with me. Todd, how you doing?
Very well. Looking forward to this podcast today.
Yeah. Really excited about learning a little bit about Jonathan. But this is our first episode on on video, and so this is really exciting. We hope our audience enjoys this. So we're going to go into a little bit of introduction on Jonathan, and then we're going to keep the road running. I don't know how to do justice to introducing you. I was literally going to have Gary come. Gary is a good friend of Jonathan and do a real amazing introduction of you. But Jonathan is the founder of Human Future, a global business and technology advisory, investment, and educational firm, I believe.
Right.
Jonathan has lots of books in smart cities, smart technology in that area. Jonathan, I mean, honestly, I don't know where to start. He has a PhD in the information systems, information technology field, which he will get into details on very soon. And lots and lots of experience he brings to the table. I'm going to have him do a little bit of introduction of himself because I probably have destroyed, that introduction right there. But Jonathan, why don't you just tell our audience who you are and what you do, and let's get this started.
Sure. Well, good to be with you guys. I'm glad you're doing this. Artificial intelligence and innovation are important topics, and together, even more important. But it's great to chat with you about these really compelling topics. I've been in tech for about 30 years in a mix of technology, sort of rich roles and leadership roles. And I've worked for big consulting firms. I worked with Tim O'Reilly up at O'Reilly Media. Anyone who's in tech has, one of O'Reilly's books.
Yeah.
Unix in a nutshell is probably on your shelf there, I imagine. And but I got this amazing opportunity to be a technology leader for a city. Now I know we're going to talk about that a little bit. That was an incredible ride for 7 years. And then I decided the time I was leaving that opportunity was, what will I do next? And I said, well, hey, I'm in the center of Silicon Valley here in Northern California. I should probably try a startup. So yeah, started a little business, a boutique firm today, which is very successful, thankfully. And so I'll talk more about that, focused on education, which is my passion. Of course, it's all kind of tech related. And I'm a professor at a number of universities. Also a writer, as you pointed out, and I got 2 new books coming out in the next 90 days, which I am thrilled to share with you and your listeners. And let me see what else. What last thing is, I also have some successful videos on LinkedIn Learning that range from a whole range of videos on blockchain technologies and crypto to data governance, quantum computing, X as a service. Lots of really timely tech topics. They're about an hour, and if you're curious about these topics, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I saw your book on no, your LinkedIn video on quantum computing. I think that was super amazing, having to watch that.
Well, thanks. What I like to do is take topics that I find interesting and important and go deep on them and then try to teach them to others. And quantum has intrigued me for a long time. And I said, can I share this topic in a way that both I can understand, but also that business people or people from all sorts of backgrounds can at least appreciate what it's about and where it might be headed. I don't get deep into the quantum mechanics and
photons.
there's a lot of physics involved. I mean, my big takeaway, having done the course, is I wish I'd had a physics background, but I don't. But I'm fascinated by physics. But you don't need to have physics. That's the thing. What people say to me all the time is why I have millions of students. I literally have millions of students. Wow. I take these tough topics and I make them accessible by everybody. And you know what the benchmark is? It's me. Like, if I can understand it, then I think everyone else can understand it. I try to write courses that I would watch.
Yeah.
And the quantum one is relatively short, But look, here I'm going to go out on a limb and say quantum computing, coupled with artificial intelligence, may be the two biggest game changers in the history of humanity, and they're coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, AI is underway, and we can already see the changes that it's bringing to society. But quantum is a little ways out. It's here, and there's some great work being done in it, some great research, some great breakthroughs almost every month. But there's something really remarkable that happens when you intersect the future of artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and quantum computing. That's when we turn the corner. That's a big deal.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. So we had a couple of questions we're going to ask you, and we're going to go right into it. Todd, do you want to start, or do you want me to just go ahead and hit the ground running here?
Sure. So thanks for sharing, Jonathan, about yourself. We were kind of curious, like you have a wide-ranging career. How did you get started kind of in your career? What kind of motivated you to get on the path that you took?
Yeah. Well, I think about my growing up as a kid, and I grew up in Ireland, right? Maybe you and your listeners are wondering, first of all, where's that accent from, right? Let's get that on the table straight away, so you don't spend the next 45 minutes having to worry about where the accent's from. Yeah, born in Ireland, and I'm an immigrant, of course, for now over a quarter of a century. But growing up, I had a lot of interest. I was interested in being a pilot first, airline pilot. Okay. Well, I had to scratch that itch, so I got my pilot's license, but I never became a pilot. But I do fly planes. I was interested in being a doctor, a medical doctor, and it was very hard. And as I went through high school in Ireland, back in the, I'm showing my age now, but back in the late 80s, it was very difficult to get into medical school. So that wasn't an option for me. I was also and continue to be a musician. So I write music, and I've played in bands, and thought maybe I'd be a successful artist. But emigrating actually to US really changed that direction. But the thing that was pretty consistent with me right from a very young age, through being influenced by my older brother, mostly my brother David, was computers. He brought a computer home back when I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I watched him program, and of course we played games. And then I learned how to program too, some very basic stuff on the Commodore VIC-20, and I was hooked. I was totally hooked. I was like, amazing. Hey, you can write a couple of lines of code, and you can make a game. You can have music play. You can have colors. You can have things move, and you can I used to create these adventure games, and so that no matter if my other interests added or changed, or I went in different directions, this underlying thread of being both interested in computing, but and apparently being okay with it, actually being able to write stuff that actually was fun and interesting. In some ways I regret not really developing my programming skills over a long time. Because I think that's kind of the new literacy. I think coding is a literacy today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We'll see where low coding and no coding goes, but for now, I'm envious of my colleagues who can actually write lines of code today. That's something I tried to get back to it a few times over the years, but I got distracted. So you got to have that passion. And when I came to the US, I was back in the mid 90s. I applied for a number of opportunities, all tech related, and this was sort of leading towards Y2K, which some of you might remember. That we thought when the clocks went from 1999 to 2000, it would mess up all the computers in the world, and many would stop working. So there was a ton of money being pumped into technology and lots of opportunities. So I got a great job with a very large consulting firm, and I grew with them. I was with them for 15 years. And I say that's the greatest apprenticeship anyone could ever have, because when you're with a big global firm, and excuse me, we had over 100,000 people, making billions of dollars every year. You can have lots and lots of different roles. You can almost have different careers within one organization. I think that's incredible. And so I kind of grew through the ranks. I've done every tech job you could imagine. I've done programming, I've pulled cable, I've crimped to the end of cables. I've done network administration, I've been on the help desk, I've run help desks, I've run software engineering groups. And then, finally, I reached the top level, the CTO and the CIO position. And I had that both at O'Reilly Media and then at the city of Palo Alto here in Northern California. And so it's been a wonderful tech career, and all those experiences completely reshape what I do today. So I think the moral of all this is you got to find your song and sing it every day. That's part of it, and sort of don't get up and be miserable about your work. Get up and be excited about your work. Be passionate. Find out what that is, and I know it's a cliche, but once you find out what it is, you'll never work a day in your life.
That's so
sad. And I mean that in a positive way, right? By the way. I don't mean you'll never have a job. You will, if you do your passion, it will never feel like working. Sorry, that came off completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think you get the idea.
I get the gist.
Yeah, we get it. Yeah. So it sounds like you have a very deep career. So what would you say, Jonathan, has been kind of the highlight? Is there a particular role that was really your favorite?
In my career, and despite my youthful appearance, I've been working for over 30 years, and there's been lots of really fascinating high points. By the way, let's be honest, there's been lots of terrible low points. Everyone has a career that goes through highs and lows. And, I'm going to be the optimist. I'm always going to sort of say the really good stuff and try to almost put a good spin on everything. But I'm also a realist. And I say, let's also be sober about the moments that were dark, and the good news is you can get out of those, and life can get good again. Life can get better. So if you're in that moment right now, don't worry, it will get better. I think if I look for something, there's two things that I think stand out to me. One is anytime I was able to help someone else change their life's path in a positive way. And when you lead people, when you're the head of an IT organization or the head of any organization, even a project manager or the leader of a team, you have this enormous responsibility and the potential to be a positive force on people. And so I remember one guy in one organization not succeeding, having conversations with him, seeing him really sad, seeing a sort of a middle-aged man break down. It's a terrible thing to see. And, for the reasons he was breaking down, just not being successful in his career. And I realized nobody had given him the educational opportunities before. No one had said, hey, just stop working for a few weeks. Let's get you into some courses. Let's get you certified in a couple of things, and then come back and go at what you're doing, because you like what you're doing. You love what you're doing. And we did this with this guy, and he went off for a few weeks. And got a couple of certifications, came back, started working again, and started being successful. And to have him come back to my office a few months later, smile on his face, beaming with optimism and being really upbeat and saying, my life is turned around. I'm succeeding now. My projects are being delivered on time. That to me is the moment where I'm like, okay, this is awesome. This is incredible. So I like those. That's a high point for me. The other sort of thread is, and I've learned this now that I'm in my sort of peak career years right now, is I'm an educator. I love to empower people with knowledge and skills myself. So, I've had this really very good career. I've had incredible experiences. I continue to, and I want to share those, and I want to teach people, and I want to help people. So through my work on LinkedIn Learning, through my books, through my work at universities, that gives me great joy. Last night I was teaching an undergraduate class at a local college here, and I'm in my element. I'm with them for 3 hours. They are just sponges, soaking up everything I'm sharing with them. We're having great discussions. We're challenging things. We're debating. That's when I'm in my element. That's what I love to do. That's a high point for me.
That's so awesome. So awesome. I had some other questions as well.
Sure.
I want to take you back to your school days.
Sure.
And I would love to ask, what was your experience like for your PhD? What did you do your PhD in?
Sure.
What was your dissertation? What was your experience like doing your PhD?
Yeah. Well, I was on a bit of a roll. Yeah, it's like this. It's very interesting. My story briefly goes like this. I had already got an undergraduate degree in industrial engineering, so I had that degree behind me. I was feeling pretty good about it, and moved to the States. And I'm actually, it's a few years in. I'm in a car with a colleague. We're driving from Tampa Bay in Florida to Orlando, and we're having a conversation about education. She had just she was about halfway, I think, maybe even getting towards the end of her degree as an adult student. And I sort of talked to her about it. I said, what was it like going back to school as a, as a grown up? And she said it was amazing. And then she shared with me, she said, the company paid for me to go to school. And I said, yeah, tell me like how much and how do you qualify? And she said, there's no qualifications. As long as you work for the business, if you apply, they'll give you X amount of dollars every year towards your tuition. And that's it. And then I said, okay, but you have to, stay with them for another 5 years or something, right? And they're like, no, there's no small print. So I said, well, this seems cool. So I think the next day when I got back to Tampa, I went on the internal, the intranet of our company, and there it was, tuition reimbursement. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going back to university in the United States. I'm getting this, in quotes, free money. After, this is money after tax. And, when you pay for education, unlike so much in your life that you pay for, nobody can take it away. This is something you have and own.
Yeah.
And that's why I love education. So I enrolled in a school and I got another degree. And then I said, when I got to the end of that, this was another undergraduate degree at an American university. I enrolled in a graduate degree. So I got a graduate degree then. And the program said, about midway through, if you want to, at the end of this, go on to apply for a PhD, there is a pathway to do that. And I'm like, well, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. I'm in, the momentum is moving. I'm actually doing it. And if I break off now, it'll be hard to return. So I decided to apply for that and, write the essay and do the interview and all that. And I was accepted. And so I'm like, well, this is cool. I'm so kind of overwhelmed. I never thought I would ever be in a PhD program, but now I got to apply myself, and I don't want to be in school for the next 6 or 7 years. I want to get this kicked out, because I'd already been in school for about 6 years or 7 years, doing that other undergraduate and the master's degree. So I went gangbusters at it. I went just really, really intensely at it. And there were weekends when I would get up in the morning at 6 a.m. and in my pajamas. Does anybody wear pajamas anymore? I'm only saying that. I don't. In my t-shirt, whatever, in my shorts, I was sitting in front of the computers.
Right.
Excuse me. And I would start writing and researching, and then I would look up at the clock, and it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I hadn't eaten, hadn't washed. It was like,
wow.
Oh, this went on for months. Yeah. Not good. Yeah, I got really into it. And but I knew if I could do this, if I could get to the end and actually do this, this would be a big deal. Big deal for me personally, my organization, my family. I mean, it's just a big deal. And so it was hard. It was really, really hard. And so hard that, when your body and mind is under stress, it'll tell you. People get all sorts of skin, ailments. They get fatigue. They get also, well, look, you can look it up. Stress and anxiety and pressure gives you all sorts of physical and mental manifestations. And I had a few of those, I gotta say. The reason I know they were PhD related is the moment I graduated, it all went away. It was amazing. Like all the issues I was having, all the ointments I was applying.
I
could throw them away.
Similar issues.
Yeah. So anyway, bottom line, it was an incredible thing to do. The hardest thing I've ever done by far. Not for everybody. It's not something I say, look, everybody should do a PhD. I'm not going to scream that out loud. It's, you do your homework, do your introspection, figure out if it's for you. But it was the right thing for me. And I loved the process of learning, of researching and writing. And it actually set me up for really good skills for all the writing I did in my books, and the consulting, and the knowledge that I acquired, and the ability to teach too. All these things were outgrowths of my own education. And I'll tell you the final thing about this whole story. So the first day of graduate school, PhD, we're on site, and the dean comes into the room, and he's going to do his welcome speech. And he's like, "Welcome, everybody. Congratulations. You got an incredible journey ahead. Some of you, about 50% of you won't graduate, because the actual graduation rates on PhDs are pretty low.
Yeah.
In our school, I think it was 50%, but on balance, across the economy, it's even worse than that, the graduation rate. Because people do it later in life, and they have children, they get married, they get divorced, they move. There's lots of reasons why it doesn't work out. So he said, some of you won't. He said, but for those of you who do, you're going to have a PhD, you're going to earn it, and you're going to be invited into meetings that you wouldn't normally be invited into. You're going to get into the room and sit at the table in situations where you wouldn't be invited had you not had a PhD. He said, you'll sit down and you'll be there with your doctorate, and it'll be, you'll be quiet, and then you'll be asked a question, and then you open your mouth and all bets are off. You are on your own. I thought that's a good way to describe the whole thing. If you get a PhD and yet you still can't articulate a big idea or enlighten people, it's given you gratification, but you're not using it for good in the world. I thought that was great advice.
So what was your dissertation on for your PhD?
Oh yeah, so I'm sorry, I never got to that. Here's some advice for listeners: is I had some great ideas. I had some world-shattering ideas. If I researched them and wrote about them, I would change the world. And but I talked to my advisor, because everybody gets an advisor, a professor who you work with for a few years. And he said, these are all good, Jonathan, but you need to do something that, first of all, something about, and number two, you need to do a dissertation that you'll finish. Right?
Yeah.
Those are two criteria that actually come in front of the world-changing stuff. Now, some people are lucky enough that, they're so brilliant, they can write about anything, or they can go after a topic and change the world. And we know some of those. For me, it was more about, let me find something that I know something about, I can build on. And yes, in some reasonable period of time, I can finish the dissertation. So at the time, I was running a software engineering team, quite a large one at a big firm. And I thought, that's the topic. Let me go into software engineering. And I did it on the elicitation process, how to acquire from people their ideas, and what they do, so that you could convert it into code. And so I went deep on that topic. The thing about PhDs is they're typically narrow but deep, right? Not wide and shallow. Yep. And so I went really deep on this idea of how do you elicit, tacit knowledge from people. And that's what I wrote about. You can find it online if you're interested.
Yep. Sounds good. Todd, you had any questions?
No, it's a very interesting story, sharing about your PhD, and just kind of curious, you mentioned that you're also now teaching a bunch of students. So would you say that your PhD kind of helped you get involved more with teaching, or were you kind of interested in that to begin with? Or can you kind of talk us through what kind of led you into this teaching path that you'd mentioned?
Yeah, so I teach because I love it, and my students enjoy my teaching style. So that's a big piece of it today. When you actually earn a PhD, you've got sort of three paths. The most obvious one is you go to a university and you teach and you research, right?
Yeah.
And so the teach, research, and the third one is you go into industry. And then there's some other avenues, but those are the core. I knew this is already 16 years ago. I knew I didn't want to go into teaching full time, but I knew I'd like to do a little bit of it. I think what the connection for me between the PhD and teaching ultimately is you do gain these new skills about how to think about things, how to research. You become a better researcher. You can help others think through the right questions to ask. So there are these skills you develop just in the process of completing a PhD, and those are things I bring to the classroom today.
Great.
Awesome. Also, I think we could go into some of your experiences at Palo Alto.
Mm-hmm.
And two questions in
Sure.
one. Your experience as an innovation director at PricewaterhouseCoopers,
mm-hmm.
and basically now your experience working on, projects with the city of Palo Alto. And then I would like you to go in deep dive into like how you're integrating smart cities into some of your work.
Sure. Well, I can tell you straight off, my interest in smart cities starts in the city, and it starts like only the last. Yeah, coincidentally, no, because of that, and it's only in the last 10 years. So when I was the director of technology innovation at PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC back in the 2000s, I wasn't looking or thinking about cities at all. That's the truth. I will say this: in 2007, I was running this small group, and one of the things we had to do was sort of have a radar of what's on the horizon, what's coming, because so we could educate our firm, but also educate some of our clients. And big data was starting to be a term and a really big topic. Voice recognition was starting to, bubble up. Something called prediction markets, never really quite reached the mainstream, but you can find them out there. I was really intrigued by that. But here's something that will surprise you. I was researching a topic called the metaverse in 2007, 15 years ago, 15 years ago.
What?
And I even called it, I was even using the term metaverse from, the book Snow Crash. That's where that's the origin of the science fiction book Snow Crash. And, I was using Second Life, which many of your listeners will know about. That was this, that was the equivalent of metaverse back then. And there was lots of others. We even had an inventory of like about 100 different immersive environments, these virtual reality environments. And I was writing about it. I was being quoted. We weren't doing podcasts back in 2007, but I definitely quoted, and you can see me in many tech magazines and different related media. I wrote an article called "The Metaverse as a Business Platform" for the Harvard Business Interactive Review magazine. And when Mark Zuckerberg brought up the word metaverse and said he was pivoting the whole company to this topic, I was like, I kind of like sat up and said, wait a minute, he's making it sound like he created this thing and it's only new in 2021. I was researching and advocating that the future was going to be virtual worlds 15 years ago. And I said, I wonder if any of my material's still out there. So I found it. I found my article, The Metaverse as a Business Platform. It's on my personal website called reichental.com, and you could read it there. It's actually incredibly prophetic. I mean, almost to the T. It's like scarily accurate. And so that's what we did in that organization, and we did that kind of work. And just one little anecdote on that. One of the things I did with my team was we would educate some of the partners, because the firm was a partnership. And I remember being at an event in Houston, Texas, probably with about 100 partners. And I was talking about the metaverse and that this could be a place where people would do business, and it would be embraced. And this is an exaggeration, but I was literally laughed off the stage. They thought I was ridiculous. Yeah. So by the way, okay, what's the lesson? The lesson is sometimes you can be way, way too early with something, but don't lose faith. If you have a strong idea and you're passionate about something, its time will come. So I'm having a little bit of the last laugh here. I'm feeling very gratified that 15 years ago, I was telling my global firm that they should be investing and thinking about the metaverse. They did not think so. And today they could have been the leaders. Well, who knew, right? And then I had the opportunity to went to O'Reilly Media. Then I got to the city of Palo Alto. It's the birthplace of Silicon Valley here, just about 20 minutes south of San Francisco. Just to give your listeners a quick orientation where it is. It is where many tech companies have either the founders live or they had headquarters at some point. Everyone's from Steve Jobs to Mark Zuckerberg, and Tim Cook, and on and on. So it's a pretty fascinating city. The reason why I was so attracted was because it was a center of Silicon Valley. What could my team and I do? What could the city do to deliver government differently by partnering and leveraging the best of technology? And so I'm there, and I joined in 2011. And some of the early work is just like, let's stabilize, the environment, much like you guys are very familiar with that work. Let's create a technology strategy. And when things are in good shape, we've got some of the basic stuff just working really well. Let's really think about an enlightened, progressive agenda for the city, technology-wise. And that's where I started getting intrigued by the whole smart city movement. It was very early, of course, back in 2011, 2012. I was dealing with my peer group from different cities who, for example, were rejecting cloud computing, because they thought it wasn't secure and they didn't have any control over their environment. So I was also working with communications leaders and IT professionals who thought there was no place for social media in public life, in public agencies. So the bar was pretty low, and it was sort of a period of transition. Now, all that has changed. The cities are embracing, cloud, they're embracing AI, they're embracing social media. So it has changed. And now the smart city movement is well underway. So I got really hooked. The big surprise was I thought that I would come to the city and I would change the city. I thought I would come, bring my skills, I would hire great people, I would change the city. Well, no, the truth is we made a difference. We did. That we can debate forever how much of a difference we made, but we certainly made a difference in people's lives, and we improved the tech. But the big takeaway beyond that was, it wasn't that I changed the city. It was that the city changed me. That's what happened. And suddenly, in my midlife, I'm like hooked on this idea of urban innovation, of transforming the dominant place where humans live. I mean, we are an urban planet now. 55% of all humans live in a city, right? And but when we get to 2050, which is not so long away, almost 80% of all humans will live in a city. It's a very, very big deal.
Yeah.
If you're into artificial intelligence, it's all going to happen in an urban environment, and many of the solutions are going to be in urban solutions. So, we can't disconnect all of the great work that you guys are doing and all of the great work that technologists are doing all around the world. We can't disconnect that from this urban movement, which is exploding. It's a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity over the next few years.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. How do you see smart cities changing the way that we think currently? And I also wanted you to get into some of the, do you think we still need to create more engineering devices to equip the cities, or do we already have some of those existing now that we could actually begin to leverage to build, great applications?
Well, what I found about cities, and maybe this is one of the areas that intrigued me so much, is it's not one topic.
Yeah.
Right? Even a small city like the one I was helping to run is made up of 10, 15, maybe even 20 different departments. And think about what those departments do. So one department, for example, is libraries, right? Libraries, a very important part of our culture and society. Another department is fire officers who their job is to put out fires, and then public safety, and then you've got perhaps a person who is responsible for the water systems, right?
Yeah.
Look how diverse those things are. Water, fire, public safety,
maybe police,
police, library. The clerk's office responsible for elections. Today is election day here in the US. And so you think about, well, you can't have a one-dimensional strategy. You have to have this multi-dimensional strategy that creates a platform for innovation, has standards and approaches to tech that are universal across the organization. But then you have to focus on individual improvements. So, you asked, the question was, what will be the experience for people in cities in the future? Well, we have to kind of dissect it. Like, you could say that today people go to libraries. Well, a lot of people now use ebooks. They don't go to libraries, right? But the library provides the ebooks, right? We talk about something like the retail experience. Well, people are ordering from home and they're getting delivered home. The delivery ecosystem has changed a lot. How will we move about? Well, let's ask the question, what do we need to move about for? Are we still going to work? Is everybody going to an office every single day? Some people are. I mean, lots of people have returned, but a lot of people are working from home. And so you have to kind of look through that lens to determine what the changes will be. There's no doubt that, just in the next few decades, cities will be much more digital in your experiences. So there won't be near as much, if any, paperwork or the bureaucracy you're used to. Most city services will be provided on an app or on your phone, on your watch or on a website, right? So that engagement itself will change. The way we move about, one of the topics that I spend a lot of time working on these days is the future of transportation. How do we move people and goods and services? And this is changing before our eyes. Everything from making more walkable cities, an idea called a 15-minute city, where everything you need is no further than 15 minutes away from you by bicycle or foot. Things like pedestrianization, where we're removing cars from city centers, light rail, electrification. So we're moving away from gas combustion engines to electric vehicles, and of course the big one is going to be autonomous vehicles. Really autonomous vehicles. And finally, kind of to bring your second part of the question into the answer about the engineering. Well, first of all, the answer is we have so many juicy problems to solve.
Yep.
It is an incredible platform for engineers and scientists and innovators and entrepreneurs. Whatever your background is, we need you to reinvent our cities. So it's massive, right?
Yeah.
I want everyone to be inspired by that. Know that if you're seeking sort of that meaningful opportunity, urbanization might be a place to play. But the thing that brings your question, into reality about engineering is the Internet of Things, IoT, the Internet of Things, right? Roughly defined as sort of adding a device to the internet rather than a person, collecting data perhaps through a sensor on the device, moving that data into the cloud, using artificial intelligence to process it, make sense of it, sort it, bring meaning to it, and then delivering it to maybe a decision maker or to another device to take an action. So you've got this sort of complex emerging ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we think there's about 40 billion connected devices in the world. The biggest user, over 20% of that is cities, our cities.
Right.
So cities are the biggest users of the Internet of Things today. And this is a very big computer science question, a data science question, an engineering question, of course, and it's a business question. How do we use it? How do we take advantage of it? So you'll find sensors doing things like public safety, cameras at intersections, cameras for security. You'll see things like air sensors, air and water for detecting, whether there's, bad particulates in the air or the water's contaminated or leaking, and much more. I mean, expands greatly beyond that, thousands of use cases. So I think the Internet of Things presents a compelling multi-trillion-dollar opportunity for engineers, and it's a lucrative one too. There's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah, so one kind of follow-up question I have, Jonathan, you spent a lot of time with Palo Alto, and just kind of curious, like in your insights from that role and writing these books on smart cities, do you have any insights as to, how cities might differ across, geography or the world? Like, are there different solutions that may be needed for, different cities in different countries, or any insights into that?
Yeah. The question I get most often, probably doesn't surprise you, is what is the most innovative or smartest city in the world? I get this question all the time. And it's a fun question, but it's not really a good question because it assumes that every city is the same and every city can be measured the same. Therefore, you can know what is doing, who's doing well and who's doing bad, right? Now, there are attempts to do this. There are indexes. There's a couple that are relatively well respected. And they've basically said, we're going to measure a city on its use of data. We're going to measure a city on its use of digitalization, on a whole range of technology topics and outcomes, of course, how it's changing the lives of community members. So the reality is every city has its own set of challenges, right? What's important in Quito, Ecuador is different to what's important in San Francisco, California, right? It's obvious. It's intuitively, we know that. So their technology needs are going to be different. Their budget is going to be different. Their skills are going to be different. So, there are hundreds of thousands of cities around the world, as you probably can imagine. And there are a lot of different types of issues. Now, what I have found is there are some common threads. And there's 4, by the way, that are pretty, I can say with confidence, almost every single community in the world is seeing these areas in common. The first one is rapid digitalization. Okay, so moving from analog services, paper-based services to digital services, moving the government online, moving onto apps, that is happening at a rapid rate all over the world. Some are much more advanced than others. Some cities have apps that have hundreds of services on them. Some cities have an app that has 2 services on them. So, there's a great diversity there. The second one is transportation. Every community is struggling with how do we move people and goods? How do we resolve congestion and the carbon emissions? How do we provide more options to get people from, places where they don't have access to work to the places where the work is? The third one is energy. We are in the opening years of an energy revolution. It's really remarkable. We are moving from fossil fuels to renewables at an incredibly fast rate, and it's disruptive, and it's the outcomes. It's a good news story, but right now it's so ugly and messy. You have to keep focused on the future in order to remain optimistic. And the fourth one is sustainability. And sustainability is a pretty big word in that it captures a lot of things. It's everything from the climate emergency we find ourselves in, to protecting farmland and our oceans, and healthy air, and also mental health. So these are the 4 big areas that are fairly consistent. I'd be surprised if you could find a community in the world that said, these aren't important. They seem to be consistent. And there's technologies for the, again, if you are an entrepreneur or an innovator, come on, there's so much work. There's so many problems we have that need to be solved. So some good work being done there, but we need a lot more people. Did I answer your question? I think I did.
Yes, thank you.
I wasn't sure.
You did. That was awesome. Yeah. So as we're getting closer to wrapping up, here, it's interesting as you start talking, you just, the light bulb moments, like I just keep getting some light bulb moments. I'm thinking, is there any work that is currently being done to identify areas of change in a city using data-driven approaches in order to improve the experiences in these different, spaces within the city? So, for example, you had mentioned the library as an example, right? And you said a lot of people are reading on Kindle, so they don't necessarily need to go to the library. Perhaps the library could focus more on building communities around studying, as opposed to using the old model where people can actually have access to resources. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, so you asked me about data, and then you asked me about, as services transition and evolve because of technology and behavior, what does that mean? So I'll try to tackle. I said that out loud because I wanted to make sure I capture both you,
right.
Address both your questions. I'll start with the last one. you gave a very nice example of transition right there. Look, libraries aren't going away, and there's still a lot of people who love going to libraries, sitting there reading a book, right? So, but if you look at the numbers over the last couple of decades, it's transformed.
Yep.
There's nowhere near the numbers,
yep.
and the people who go to libraries have changed. I mean, it is a part of our society that is in transition. Digitalization is the biggest impact, right? So there are many fascinating ideas about what is the role of a library in a city, and are they knowledge centers? Are they places to study? Are they places for forming community, for having community groups? Are they places for learning, for classes and hobbies and building community? And yes, all of those. So yeah, talk to a librarian today and they'll tell you, their world has changed like 180 degrees, and so it'll continue to as people's expectations and behaviors and digitalization will come into play. That's the same for quite a lot of services, and well, look, a big one would be energy, right? So, for the last few centuries, we have been living on a diet of fossil fuels, and it's been successful in terms of just driving energy. It's been lucrative. It's actually been a good business to be in. But as renewables start to move into the center of the topic, the business model for energy companies is shifting. And if you're a city that actually delivers energy, you have now completely new products to deal with. Everything from, the whole solar ecosystem is completely different. Right. You're using a lot more tech to help homes and businesses know how much energy they're using, and you're trying to optimize the network. So it changes the game. And utility companies are saying to themselves, like, who are we going to be when we grow up? What does the future look like? So yes, innovation and tech is changing the nature of how cities operate and what they do. Getting back to the first point, the first question, now it's a lovely little cue up because I have a book coming out in data in 30 days. Well, if you're listening to this, it may already be out, but the book is called Data Governance for Dummies. It's part of the wildly successful Dummies series. And it takes your question head on, is what is the role of data in society and in organizations? Turns out, and I spent a year researching my book, data is the most valuable asset in every organization today. Let me say that again. Data is the most important asset in every organization today, and we're not managing well. We're some organizations are just sitting on this incredible resource. They don't even know how to take advantage of it. Many organizations don't have data science or data analytics skills. They don't know how to store and protect their data, right? When I arrived at the city back in 2011, I was sitting in the council chambers. We would do our city council meetings every Monday night. And I would go in just as out of curiosity. I wanted to know what they were talking about. I wanted to know what was important. And I would sit there, and, the way it's organized typically in the United States is you got, your council members, anywhere from 3 to 5 to 9 or even more, all facing the community. And in front of them is a row of seats where the people who are presenting or answering questions are seated. And then you've got the audience area. And I was in the audience area watching how staff who were seated before the council were, answering questions. And very often a question would come up around from a council member would be, how many, how much, how big, what's the trend, what's the percentage? There were these data questions all the time. And, in deference, with great love to my colleagues, they didn't have those answers. And what they would do is they would give sort of anecdotal, or they would say, we need to study that and get back to you, right? And I remember thinking to myself, we're in the 21st century. We have that data. These guys just don't know how to get it, and they don't know how to, actually reproduce it quickly as a question has been asked. And I sort of made it my mission a little bit to help the city become more data-driven, and not only help staff be able to answer those questions, but to also use data to make better decisions generally. And number 3, and allow the community to access that data too, so they could make decisions and build solutions and do stuff independently of the city. So sort of a 3-pronged approach. And over 7 years, we made a lot of progress. When I sat in the council meeting, 5, 6 years later, and a council member says, what's the percentage of X in this situation? And a staff member would say, just a moment. And there'd be a management analyst who would look at one of our systems and say, it's 33%, whatever. They'd come back and the staff member would say, it's 33%. I was like, we have come so far. We've transformed the way we think and do city business using data. We see this all over the world, by the way. We see this all over the world. Data is rising to be a core city competency, but there's still a long way to go, right? Cities are hiring chief data officers. Cities are hiring data analysts, and so the progress has been made. Now we need to focus on governance, which is what my book is about. And I think we'll see even more incredible things done by cities as they embrace data in more enlightened ways.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Todd, you're going to ask another question?
Well, yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jonathan. So I believe you have another book also that's coming out, or may already be out, depending on when you're listening to this. What's that one about?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. So the first one is December 8th, Data Governance for Dummies. You can get it on Amazon or any bookstore anywhere in the world. It's ready, by the way, today, where it's election day, November 8th in the United States, 2022. And it's #1 actually on Amazon in the data warehousing category. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then in January 23rd, 2023, so January 23 is a book about the future of money, but it is about cryptocurrency. Yes, it is about digital money and specifically cryptocurrency. The book is currently tentatively titled Cryptocurrency Foundations, but by the time you're watching this video, wherever you're watching it or listening on whatever service, the book might have a different title. And it may already be out, or maybe just about to come out. So you can find it just by Googling my name, Jonathan Reichental, or go to Amazon, go to cryptocurrency books, and you'll find it there.
All right, thank you. And just can you share a little bit more about Human Future and what your vision is for this company?
Yeah, well, it comes from the work I was doing at the city of Palo Alto. I was, as we were having successes in the work we were doing as a team, a lot of people wanted to know what we were doing. I mean, and you have to do that. I think that's a real big responsibility. So I had this chance to speak to a lot of city leaders, and often I would travel to other cities in the United States and around the world to help them and share our successes with them, and also share, what doesn't work so well, the failures I talked about earlier. And, I was doing this periodically, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the ability to share and to help others. But at some point, I knew, as I was thinking about what am I going to do next, because at some point I knew I was going to leave the city anyway. I thought to myself, why don't I do this full time? Why not actually just, help communities and even businesses try to understand the role of tech and how it can help them, and the role of data. So I ended up leaving it's almost 5 years ago now. And this startup, I said, hey, I'm going to just do what I'm doing, but do it full time, and I'm going to charge, because when I was at the city, it was all free. I did it for love, Then I was like, I can actually make a living out of this. So at the core is sort of some consulting, helping others through the appreciation of, like, for example, how do we prepare for an autonomous transportation future? What do we have to do now? What do we need to know? How do we develop a strategy to move from fossil fuels to renewables? And how do we digitalize our major services? All the key things that city leaders are wondering. It also happens to be that private companies are interested in many of these questions too. How do we govern our data? How do we deploy IoT? How do we create really compelling services for our customers and our internal operations? So Human Future is all about helping all types of organizations create a better future for humans, right? That's where the name comes from, through consulting and education. So a big part of it is teaching and workshops and keynotes, the kind of pure education things. And then finally, I figured, some of these startups, some of these new ideas need help. And I want to help them get off the ground, the startup community, to be able to bring new ideas that are positive to society, what we call sort of social impact businesses, positive social impact. So we invest in those, sometimes financially, a lot of the time with time, and we get a little bit of equity. So part of Human Future, we have a portfolio of companies, everything from a permitting software company that does, more digitized permitting for communities, to a flying car company is in my portfolio too, which just recently announced themselves. They're called Aleph, A-L-E-F. It actually, the car drives on the road like normal, and then it can take off vertically, and it works. It's pretty incredible. So check that out. So that's part of the portfolio. So that's the 3 legs of Human Future.
Okay, great. Thank you. And, this is called the AI innovation space. And it was very interesting to hear that you were kind of investigating the metaverse before many people even heard about it. So what do you kind of think is the future of artificial intelligence? Any predictions or insights?
Yeah, no, you leave the most important question right to the very end. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm out of here. Just kidding. No, look, it's a hot space. I have a couple of ways to quickly answer the question. One is, we ought not to think of AI by itself, right? There's this term called convergence, right? AI gets really interesting when you couple it with other technologies, right? And I have this sort of formula, the Reichental formula, and it's like, take a number of tech, add an industry, and then you ask, what does that equal, right? And so you think of something like Uber. What is Uber? Uber is GPS, smartphones, cloud computing, social, AI, plus, and transportation. That gets you on-demand, transportation. So I think of AI as one of the elements you plug into a number of others, whether it's big data, IoT, quantum in the future, and maybe, what would happen if you took quantum computing, AI, big data, and pharmaceuticals? Well, you're probably going to get better medicine, right? You're going to get precision medicine, right? You're going to get much better medicine. So, it is this incredible catalyst that takes, what humans do, but escalates it such that it achieves outcomes that we couldn't do with our, our finite human minds. I think of AI also in the second category as a partner to humans. Now, the topic that always comes up in my classes is robots are coming, AI is coming, humans have no role. We're just pointless. We're just going to be sitting on the beach or drinking cappuccinos, whatever, or mojitos, right? And I'm going to say, yes, AI and robotics and automation is going to displace a lot of people, like maybe 20% of the world's workforce over the next decade or so. It's massive. But if you look at the 4 industrial revolutions, humans find other things to do. There are other problems that we can solve. We shift, we reskill. The jobs will probably be more skilled, less kind of repetitive, manual work. But really where I see the magic is AI being an augmentation to humans, and we partner up. So you think about the role of a surgeon, right? And my view is, within a few decades, robots will do surgery, and we will look back and say, humans used to do surgery? That's wild. That's like so medieval, right? Because humans make mistakes and they drop things and they cut where they shouldn't cut. And robots are precise and, and can be customized, and, can use intelligence to make really data-driven decisions. But I don't see like a surgery potentially where a patient is just lying by themselves and there's robots all around. Yes, I see that, but I also see humans and having a very special role in that room as well, kind of partnering to make better outcomes in medicine. And I think the last thing I would just say, and tie it in with my book, right, my data governance book, is I think of AI and I think of data in the same breath. the better we are at managing data, eliciting good quality data, sorting our data, storing it, managing it, being able to access it. The better we do those, the better AI will function. At least today, AI, we want to give it lots and lots and lots and lots of data. We want to give it good quality data. We want it to learn from that data and then learn from itself. So today, I think I look at the two as really, really coupled. If an organization wants to succeed in AI, they also got to be really good at data. And so they ought not to lose sight of that too. So those are some of my quick thoughts.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah, I know you got anything further?
Oh, no, I think we covered a majority of it. And it was just such an exciting conversation with you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of this podcast, and we're looking forward to having you a lot more. To discuss future. As Todd was saying, hopefully we got a prophet, a digital prophet, come share some insights as to what the future is going to look like in the AI ML space. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks to both of you. Thanks for hosting me and for doing this. Appreciate it.
Awesome. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.